I'm sitting here in Gan Sakar in Jerusalem in this beautiful park with Rav Yonatan Udren, who runs the RRG Beit Midrash at Hebrew University, and we are going to learn a Agada, a small Agada, an ancient Jewish kind of saying, and uncover some of the meaning behind it. Okay, so Rav Yonatan, let me read it, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Okay, so it's very small. This Agada is from Gemara Brachot 34b, and it goes like this. A person is only allowed to bow at the beginning of the Shemona Esrei and at the end of the Shemona Esrei. But if one desires to bow down at the beginning and the end of every single blessing, we must teach him not to bow. Okay, so before I hear your thoughts, I want to just bring an interpretation of Rav Kook, and then maybe we could kind of talk about that. Rav Kook says that bowing symbolizes subservience, obedience. I'm nothing. My desires aren't important. Only matters is who I'm bowing to. And Rav Kook says that this Agada is trying to teach us, if you think prayer is about nothingness, I'm nothing, I just have to get rid of my whole personality in front of God and beg, so we have to teach you not to bow. In other words, you can only bow a little bit. Once at the beginning, once at the end, a little bit of humility, but don't make the whole thing self-depreciating. And for Rav Kook, I guess this Agada is trying to teach you a very big yesod, foundation about spiritual growth in general, but specifically prayer, that it should be empowering. And to bow every single time is to kind of physically express a spiritual concept that I'm a nothingness before God. And in Judaism, literally the name of the prayer is called the Amidah, the standing prayer. We need to stand before God. So any thoughts on this Agada?
I love that interpretation of Rav Kook, and it fits beautifully with a piece of Rav Sadok that I immediately thought of when you read the piece of Sadok Cohen of Lublin, who talks about the Tachanun prayer, the prayer after the Amidah, where put our head down. Some people even prostrate themselves, I've seen, on the ground. That there is a certain stance in tefillah which is about subjugating ourselves, is realizing, and this is the Maharal talks about prayer as illustrating our absolute and utter dependence on Hashem. Everything comes from you, Hashem. All I can do is try to open myself up to be a receptacle for the good that you're putting into the world. But that isn't the whole stance of it. And I wonder, the placement of Tachanun at the end of the prayer, or as the Gemara points out here, there's two spaces in the Amidah where we must supplicate ourselves. You can't just give yourself over. If there's only a giving of oneself over on Mesirat Nefesh, what are you being Mesirat Nefesh for? In other words, there has to be a value there that I'm deciding to dedicate my life and give my life up for. But if it's just, I'm just lying down and you do with me whatever you want, so the Mesirat Nefesh has a lot less strength to it or meaning to it, because it doesn't have a value that stands up behind it. And I remember one of my teachers, Rav Daniel Cohen, said that the prayer of Hashem, just give me insight into what your will would be, is a very weak prayer. And the more developed and articulate a prayer is, the more powerful a prayer is. So subjugate yourself. Yes, there are 2 points within the prayer service that we do understand, that we do need to be Mesirat Nefesh. We do need to understand that everything we have is from a higher power. But if we don't have the values that we're able to stand up for, so then the point of prayer is a bit meaningless.
It's interesting that this Agada says at the end, a person who prays and bows too much, we have to teach him not to bow. It's almost like a protest. Like, bowing has a danger to it. It has a negative effect on one's mindset. So I guess when I read this Agada, I think to myself, what were Chazal, what were the ancient rabbis dealing with that made them write such a text down? And maybe one of the answers is there may be a very strong belief that they were seeing around them of religious people who thought, the more religious I am, the less important my beliefs are, my intuitions are, my thoughts. And so they had to write this Agada down to counteract that. Like we were talking about earlier today, you and I, the dagesh, the emphasis, whenever somebody writes down a text, it's because they're educationally saying this is lacking. I need to put more of this thought into the world. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your thoughts on, seeing religion too much as the opiate is the masses, and religion is just about getting rid of myself. And where's that balance for you? When do we need to bow, and when do we need sometimes to stand up in front of God?
We mentioned this last time we sat together. I don't want to repeat myself, but I do think it's an important point because it's something that I find so talked about today. This idea that when someone says, "I'm sending my hopes and prayers," that there's a certain kind of looking down on such a sentiment, almost looking at religion as you're just waiting for God to come and do everything.
Passive.
Yeah, very passive. As opposed to, I think the deeper concept of prayer here is, again, and I love that you put the emphasis on the Amidah, that it's a place of standing up, and here also I think in the context of activism, standing up for what you believe. We stand up 3 times a day for what it is that we believe in. Now, prayer is an essential component of it because it opens, as you said before beautifully when we were speaking about tefillah, prayer as a trigger, the Shemona Esrei, those 19 prayers as triggers towards reminders for who I am and what I should be fighting for. So in that way, prayer becomes a sense of activism, and then I get realigned to be able to stand up and know who I am and know what I'm standing for. And therefore that brings me to action. Prayer should be the essential step in what brings one towards action and not the final step.
And I think to add to that I think bowing down, and in general, if you want to think about posture, when you have confidence, your posture is better. And when you're depressed or you feel disappointed, your shoulders drop. So I think it really is a very profound symbol that when I bow, I put my face down. I really feel like I'm nothing. I can't really contribute to the world. And the rabbis want prayer not to be about the feeling. You should come to prayer not in desperation, I'm nothing, but Hashem, inspire me, motivate me, empower me, give me feelings, thoughts, emotions, trigger something inside of me that I can take responsibility for my life. And maybe that's why it's so powerful to call this prayer not the Shemona Esrei, but the Amidah. The goal of this prayer is to Omed. I want to, by the end of this prayer, I'm going to be able to have better posture. I'm going to be able to stand up higher and look at the world.
I'm thinking of a beautiful Perush by the Netziv of Naftali Tzvi Berlin, your street, right? Who wrote a very important Perush commentary on the Torah, and he there talks about humility when we're discussing the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. And one might think, as you're expressing, that humility is about understanding our nothingness in the face of God, but he says the opposite, that our humility comes from a place of understanding that we've been given divine gifts to give to this world, and a humble stance is not to negate those gifts, but to understand their source. The humble person walks in the world understanding that the gifts that I've been given are from Hashem and they're to be utilized in the world, whereas a false sense of humility would be to think I'm nothing, I have nothing to give. Well, if that's true, why are we here in the first place? What are we here to do?
It's beautiful, very, very beautiful. I guess I just want to end on this thought that me personally, I think many years I was in Haredi Yeshiva. I was in Haredi Yeshiva for 8 years. It's a long time. I'm only 31. It's a lot of my life. And I think many years I felt that, if I'm really going to be more serious about religion, then I have to stop imposing my will on everything. I have to get over myself, overcome my desires, transcend myself. And when I started learning Rav Kook when I was about 25, 26 years old, even a bit younger, I started reading a very different posture towards religion, and a religious outlook that wants you to see your own desires and thoughts and emotions as divine. Meishaloch is very focused on this as well, and it really captured a very deep thing that I was struggling with, which is religion about slavery or about freedom? And Rav Kook really helped me realize this, and this Agada, I think, is illustrating that the point of prayer and the point of religion is to help you stand in life.